Well, good morning. I'll continue the welcome. It's great to see everybody this morning, and welcome to those who are joining us on the live stream. My name's Ryan. Thanks for the warm introduction from Dr. Richard Frost. Also want to just thank my colleagues and our great student leaders for putting this event together. How many of you went to Admitted Student Day? A few of us. Not a ton. Well, welcome back if you haven't been here since. I'm going to share some thoughts. Some of those you heard at Admitted Student Day, and some will be new for this morning and for where things are headed this morning. I do want to say it seems like we're trying to empathize with the parents this morning and talking about sending your child off to college, and I think I can do my best to do that as well. To say that I did also recently send my oldest son, James, off to school. Here he is. It was tough, though. It really, right? It's tough at all levels. Well, here's where we're headed today. So we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences between high school and college, some of the academic transition notes. I shared some of those things at Admitted Student Day. We'll talk about some of the surprises related to academic majors, and then we'll kind of set the stage for the rest of the day and talk a little bit about Hope's curriculum, a little bit about what to expect out of the advising process. There's like a whole building, Martha Miller, there's a whole building full of people waiting for you this morning, faculty and staff and student leaders waiting to talk with you and support you and answer your questions. So we'll get to that as soon as we can. The reason we like to start with this academic transition information is because students who come to Hope, well, they tell us that that their experience here wasn't always exactly what they experienced in high school, that some of the ways of learning were a little bit different than what was expected before. And the first one, I'm going to share a handful of those. The first one, I think this is actually the biggest one. I shared this previously with some of you. So when you're in high school, you're in class all day long, right? You're in class, well, not everyone, but most of you you're in class a big chunk of the day, and then at home you're kind of expected to do a smaller amount of coursework. Well, in college, those are flipped. So you're in class a smaller chunk of the day in most cases, but you're expected to do a much larger chunk of time on your homework. And so the class time and study time expectations are flipped. And that is one of the biggest differences. It's very easy to explain. It's kind of easy to understand, but it really is huge. Because you might get your schedule from us, your first college schedule from us, and at the end of July, and you'll look and you'll be like, oh, I have a class at 9 a.m., and then I have a class at 1 p.m. Like, awesome, right? I can play Madden, I can take naps, I can hit the beach, and you can do those things, and we'll do those things, right? But we're kind of thinking you're going to be doing work also during some of those times. So that takes some getting used to. Current students, am I speaking truth here? Yeah. So this is a big part of the transition. Another part is students are expected to read and know the material not covered in class. Now this varies, of course, in class to class, and it varies with your high school experience. But in general, faculty are going to want and assume to know that you've done the work. So not to like call someone out, but you might show up to class on the first or second day. What's your name? Mackenzie? And they might say, like, hey, Mackenzie, what did you think about what the author shared with the perspectives on the context with which Shakespeare was writing and the influence with such and such play? And if you didn't do the reading, you would be, it'd be kind of like deer in headlights. So there's an expectation that you're doing some of this pre-work, some of this pre-knowledge, and are showing up and are ready to contribute. Third, beyond memorization, students are expected to make connections and interact with material, not just absorb it passively or spit back memorized information only. We'll be seeking meaning in much of what we do. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Okay, so flip over something you can write on. I'm not joking, this is your first quiz, right? If you've got something to write with, grab it. If not, that's okay. So I'm going to put up a series of letters on the screen for 8 to 10 seconds, okay? And don't write them down, just look at them, absorb them, pay attention to them, and then we'll talk about them afterward, okay? Okay, now write them down. Parents no helping those students. They're on there. All right, we're going to do one more list. I'm going to put up another series of letters for 8 to 10 seconds. Don't write it down as you're looking at it, but kind of just attend to it. And try to jot that list down. Okay, so some of you noticed it was the same list, right? And most of you probably, who did better on the second list? Who got a little bit more? Like almost everyone, right? It's always almost everyone. And there's various reasons for that. What are some of them? What do you think? Second row. What's your name? Lindsay. Any thoughts? I know, it's like class. You're like, why are they calling on me? This is supposed to be a nice, pleasant event, and they're like calling names, right? Any thoughts on why we remember more? Yeah, things that are popular, so things you've seen before, prior knowledge and meaning. Yeah, any other thoughts? I won't call on anyone else. Thank you, Lindsay. Good job. Yes. Wonderful. Yes. So what's your name? Bryce. So Bryce organized them into meaningful chunks. So you see security, you might see cable stations, back to that meaning that Lindsay mentioned. You might also notice there's fewer lines. One has 6, the next has 5. They're all in 3s. So there's a variety of reasons, and you guys hit them. It's basically organization and meaning. My point being that we want to seek for meaning. We don't just want basic information. So you're going to take some classes at Hope, for example, that are called interdisciplinary, that try to that utilize multiple disciplines, different types of academic courses, and they may ask you to apply that information. So you might be asked not just to memorize a certain type or certain types of chemical compounds. You might get an assignment that's something like create a playground for 5 to 7-year-olds. So now you need to talk about like physiology. How big are they? How much do they weigh? What kind of movements can they do? What kind of coordination do they have? Some psychology. Well, what are they like? What do they like? Right? And then you also need to start moving into the engineering, the materials, the compounds, and all kinds of things. So you may have some upper level kind of projects like that where you're working with meaning. Number 4, the speed with which material is covered is often faster than before. Cramming is less successful. If you're here, we know you're bright. You got into Hope. You're coming. Some of you may have gotten away in the past with being able to just brush up a little bit the night before or moments before an exam. Well, that starts to be a little less helpful and successful in college. And number 5, this one always makes some folks a little nervous. Some professors don't check up on you for everything. Okay? Some do. I'm kind of a checker-upper. but some don't. And what I mean by that, for example, is you might be used to always being able to make things up or have people help remind you of stuff. And you might have a professor where you are ill or for whatever, or sleep through, or for whatever reason you miss a test. And this professor may simply write down a 0 because when they look through the test grades, they don't have one for you. So you got a 0, and they write down a 0 in their grade book, and that's the end of it for the professor. They don't contact you to remind you, to let you know that you didn't take the test, or contact you to rearrange a time for you to take the test. They just wrote down a 0. Now, some will, especially in the first year types of courses, will kind of work with you and remind you and check in with you. But the point is, you are in charge now of your own academic record, knowing what's going on, keeping your own calendar, knowing when things are happening and following up with them. And it's good because you'll grow as you'll just grow as a learner and as an adult as you continue to own those things more and more. So now that I've made you nervous, I'll just remind you that you can do it. There's lots of sources of support. We have a very supportive faculty. You'll have an academic advisor you meet with regularly. We have all kinds of resources at Hope that are available to you, an academic success center with free tutoring, a writing center that will advise you on your writing process, and of course, you still have your own network of family and friends to support you, and many of them are here today. So there are some differences. There are some common differences with that high school to college transition, but they're good. They're good. Your learning will be rich, and it will go deep, and you will own it, and you can do it. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. I want to spend a little bit of time on talking about academic majors, because often when we go the rest of this day, and some of you have already looked at the registration materials. Who's already taken a look at them, at least a little bit? A lot of us, about half of us. When you go to make those kind of registration choices and some of your thoughts, often it can feel like you need to know everything. Well, I'm not going to take chemistry unless I'm going to be a doctor, so I need to know now if I'm going to be a doctor in 15 years. And so you'll start to put this kind of pressure, I have to know everything before I do anything. And so I do this next session to kind of dispel some myths about academic majors and their relationships to career. First, I just want to recognize student context, okay? Students, how many of you have been hearing these questions for the last couple years? Right? Where are you going to go to college? What are you going to major in? Lindsay, where are you going to go to college? What are you going to major in? Mackenzie, where are you going to go to college? What are you going to major in? Right? Who's been asked these at least 10 times in the last, right? Most of you. So, and then you start to get advice, right? Lindsay, business degree is a good practical option, right? Get a job with one of those. Jobs are good, yeah? And then you might get other advice but Lindsay, you got to do what you love, because if you're not doing what you love, what are you really doing, right? And then we find out that, oh, geez, Lindsay likes art, you guys. All right, I take back the last bit. What are you going to do with the art degree, Lindsay? Come on. So you start to get this advice. Some of you have some kind of family hopes or expectations, maybe to be the first lawyer or the first doctor or the next lawyer or the next doctor, right? Now, I'm not saying these questions are good or bad. I'm just recognizing that, students, I know you've been asked these questions. I know you've heard a lot of this stuff, and I know that in some of you it produces anxiety, right? Now, the people asking you these questions love you, and they care for you. That's why they're asking. They want you to be successful. They want you to kind of follow your own path in many cases. So I think we ask ourselves these questions. We ask each other these questions, often with good intent. I'm just recognizing that they may come to you, and it may bring you a little bit of anxiety. And I'm hoping that the next piece we do will help reduce that anxiety a little bit as we see some surprising information in relationship to majors and careers. So we're going to take a look at a handful of really successful people You've seen some of these maybe at a new student advising day, although it's not the full same folks. But so first I want to start with Chad Hurley, co-founder, CEO of YouTube. Okay? What's your name? Lydia. Lydia, have you heard of YouTube? It's a video sharing platform on the internet. Yes, Lydia's heard of YouTube. For those that didn't know, it's a video sharing platform on the internet. I'm joking. I know you know what YouTube is. So he started it. He ran it, not for that long. And then in 2006, he sold it to Google for almost $2 billion. And I heard that his parents are proud. Right? Yeah. So what do you think he majored in? I heard a number of them whispered. He was a fine arts major. Lindsay, this fine arts thing might not be so bad now that I think about it, right? Well, you know what? YouTube isn't the most complex coding. It's a massive platform, right? But it's not the most complicated thing. YouTube is a little bit more of like a kind of a big idea about how we share things with one another. It's kind of a creative idea now that I think about it. It's kind of a fine arts type of idea. A lot of our fine arts folks are creative, have different perspectives and different views of how to think about things. And sometimes that comes with an entrepreneurial spirit, like it did with Chad Hurley. Next person, Connie Chung, journalist. Students, you don't know who this is. Some of the parents do. Parents, do you know who Connie Chung is? Yes, the parents know, the students don't. This one's for me and your parents, okay? Connie Chung, students, was a journalist, one of the most successful female national news anchor pioneers in the 1980s and 1990s. What do you think? She was a journalism major. You're like, okay, now I'm reverse tricking you, right? You're like, it's not that, anything but that one. No, because sometimes people know what they want to do. They've known for a long time. They plan to do it. They pursue it. They're successful, and it goes well, and life is good, and that is kind of Connie Chung's professional story. She studied what she wanted to study, and she pursued it, and she was successful in it, and that will be the case for some of you here. It tends to kind of be a smaller percentage of the population. We'll come back to that, actually, in just about 1 minute. Next person, J.K. Rowling, author of Harry Potter. I'm sure everyone's heard of Harry Potter. She was a double major. You can hardly go wrong, right? You have pretty good odds of guessing one of them. She credits some of her study with helping her write the world of Harry Potter. I'm giving you lots of hints. What do you think? Classics. I heard classics, I heard English. She was classics in French. If you said classics in English on my test, you'd get 1.5 out of 2. Because with English and French, we're talking about like literature and language, right? That kind of development that would be helpful for any writer. And then classics, yes, this study of ancient cultures and languages. Who's read any Harry Potter or seen any Harry Potter movies? So most of us, looks like, have seen something. There's a lot of Latin and messed up Latin. So she uses some Latin words, probably from some of her classics knowledge, and also takes some Latin and kind of mixes it up a little bit and makes it her own. But a lot of spells and names in her work come from these Latin roots. The last person I'm going to reference, Thurgood Marshall, lawyer, first African American to serve on the Supreme Court. Perhaps like some of the parents, kind of started in one thing and then did a different thing. I've done a couple different things. He did a couple different things. Both of those things are recognized on here. He started in dentistry and then went into law. So I highlight those folks to kind of make 3 points that I will make now. I call them major myths. Okay? These things that people have confused about majors and their relationships to careers. Here's the first one. I'm going to share 3. Major myth number 1. Most people know their major and career goals when they enter college. That's not true. A majority of students do not know their major. And for those that do have an intended major when they come to college, about 60% change it. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just noting that the idea that most folks know what they're going to do and end up doing it happens to not be very true. Major myth number 2, I will only have one career in my lifetime. The truth is, folks in the age demographic of our students here are going to do a bunch of different work, maybe 12 or 15 jobs. I've already done a handful. I'm not that old. We expect folks in your demographic to do a lot of different work. And also, some of you, there are certainly some people in this room, some students, some parents, definitely some students, but there are some of you in this room who are going to do a job before you retire, which is kind of silly to talk about because you haven't even got to college yet, but you're going to do a job before you retire that doesn't exist yet. That will be the case for some of you in this room. So you don't know what it is right now. You can't plan on it. You can't major in it. There's no major for it yet. And that will be the case for some of you. Now, maybe you do know what it is because it might be something that you create. But some of you will do a job that doesn't exist yet. What do we do with that information? We'll come back to that in a second. Part of the point that I'm wanting to make right now is, I got one more. Sorry. Major myth number 3, liberal arts graduates are unemployable. Or if I pick the wrong career, I'll end up in the wrong thing, or I'll be forced to do one thing for the rest of my life. Well, the reality is, when you go to a college like Hope, where we're engaged in the liberal arts, you gain a variety of skills. We set up our education so that you're learning a variety of, sometimes we call them transferable skills, critical thinking, communication skills, the ability to apply knowledge to real-world settings, a variety of skills that are really important for almost anywhere you go. And the other thing that's kind of fun to take a look at is that most graduates in most academic majors are employed in a pretty wide variety of fields, right? We have a handful of majors at Hope that are what we call our more professional majors, where if you do that major, usually you do a job with the same title. There's not actually very many of those, but there are some. What are some of those? Nursing, yeah, so our nurses go on to nurse. Engineering, yes, although if you're an engineer, there's so many different types, and you could be studying the movement of people, or the making of roads, or sound waves to make cell phones better, so that's pretty wide variety. But yeah, nursing, engineering a bit, education, most of our education graduates go on to teach, although not maybe quite as many as you would think. Accounting, a lot of our accounting majors go on to do accounting. But what do our arts majors do? And our sociology majors, and our business majors. Our business majors don't go work at the business store, right? There isn't one. Everything's kind of a business in some way, right? So what do our history majors do? What do our majors kind of all over? You can ask that for almost any major. Well, we have a cool resource at Hope. I don't have time to pull it up now, but on our career development website, we have a tab called What Can I Do with a Major in? And if you pull it up, click on the major, it only takes 60 seconds to answer the question, what can I do with a major in? That's often a kind of a stressful question. It's actually really easy to answer. You click on some of our majors here on that resource, and you'll see the types of work that people tend to do. You'll also see a list of different specific jobs current Hope or Hope alumni from that department are doing. So if you click on the psychology, what can I do with a major in? You'll see specific work around the country that Hope psychology grads are doing. So you can really answer that question pretty quick. And I'd encourage you, if you're interested in that question, what can I do with a major in, that you check that out. All right, so part of my point here is to just note that academic majors are not equivalent to jobs, right? They are contributors, they're very important, but they're not identical. And I want to cite some data from someone that's not me. So I'm going to show you some survey results. It's the longest survey title of survey results I ever show. It is the National Survey of Employers on College Learning and Graduates Work Readiness Survey. Basically what it is colleges asked many employers, what do you want us to do with students? What do you want more of? How do we make our students more hireable for you? And this is what they said. The employers say these are their top things. There's lots of other stuff on this list. These are all the highest ones. Communication skills, critical thinking, being able to apply knowledge to real-world settings, complex problem solving, ethical decision-making, collaboration, creativity, concepts and developments in science and technology. So a lot of these are those transferable skills that we just talked about earlier. So let's also take a look at Hope graduates, kind of see how we're doing. So here's some recent data from our class of 2015. 95% of the workforce was, after graduation, was in either graduate school or employed 6 months after graduation. So people are doing well. They're moving on to their next step. And the other thing I want to point out right here is we also survey all of those alumni at that 6 months point after graduation and ask them what contributed to your next thing. How did you get that job? What were the biggest factors that contributed to you getting that job? Their top 3 things that our alums say. Number 1, communication skills. That's also what the employer said. That was their number 1, right? It's kind of like, well, that's kind of boring, right? Like, that's number 1 for everything? Well, apparently that's really, really important and vital, and you will get a lot of work on that while you are at Hope. Number 2 is their academic major, so you see the importance of the major there. And number 3 is internships, so those experiences outside of the classroom. I also want to kind of pause here to just know. So I've spent some time talking about majors, some surprises with majors and careers. We'll invest lots of time thinking and talking with you and planning with you about your academic major, about your future profession. But I also just want to point out that we also will talk about other things that we view as maybe a little more encompassing, a little larger and deeper, that include your major, that include your career, but are not synonymous. So sometimes at Hope you might hear people use the language of calling or vocation. Some will talk about finding a sense of purpose. Sometimes you might see this quote used. It's often used here. It's from a Presbyterian theologian named Frederick Buechner. The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Kind of like connecting your sense of who you are, what you're good at, with the opportunities and needs around you and in the world. And we'll help you think through those kinds of things. We'll help you think about, like, what do you love doing? What are your interests? What are your strengths? And if you're not sure what those are, we have a lot of resources and activities to help you kind of reflect and explore those. Or if you already have a sense of what those are, we'll help you think about how to apply them contextually in academics and in work experiences while you are at Hope. We partly do that. We partly talk so much about this. You've maybe heard me, this is I talk a lot about kind of finding your fit. Anytime you come to hear me, or if you take one of my classes, that'll probably be some part of it. And part of it is so we don't feel like this, right, when we go to make our decisions. Like, well, I always said I'd be a dentist. I don't even know if I really want to, but I said it, so I think I'll just kind of stick with it. Well, that might be fine. I would encourage you, if you're thinking something, to, explore it. Keep going down it. But we want you to find a fit. We don't want you to be trying to be pretending to be one thing when you're really a better fit or more gifted or more connected to something else. We want to help you find a fit. So our kind of 2 cents on picking a major, you might hear us talk about personal awareness, educational awareness, professional awareness. Personal awareness, just who am I? What are my strengths? What are my interests? Educational and professional awareness, well, what fields meet my interests? What are the experiences I can do to test them? What are the opportunities? So a lot of you in high school maybe had 10 to 15 different academic disciplines, right? So Hope has like 50. Do you know what they are? If you don't know what our 50 majors are, how do you know which one is the one you should be doing, right? So we'll help you kind of look through some of those things if you haven't already explored them. All right, last up, the third kind of piece of information I want to share. I want to talk a little bit about Hope's curriculum and a little bit about the registration process in general and for the rest of today. First, I want to give you an overview. This is in your packets. This is on our website, so this is not new information. This is all the same information, just some of the dates. Kind of the big view on how scheduling works for your first semester is we share information with you through the registration website, right? Then you get overwhelmed by it. That's the next step, right? I'm just kidding. Hopefully you're not overwhelmed by it. But then you kind of digest it, and then we have some time for you to kind of look at it, think through it, ask questions. Many of you are doing that here today. Others are doing that at home. And then you send us by June 21st, you send us your registration worksheet, these pages where you let us know what classes you're interested in or considering or thinking about. And then staff and faculty like myself will sit down and look through your information, and we'll build you a schedule and send it back to you. So that's kind of the process in general. But I want to highlight a couple curricular things. This is somewhat to set the stage for you students, so you have kind of a big view of what you're doing this morning. It's also to give your parents a little bit of kind of curriculum information, because their next session isn't particularly focused on curriculum. So first, I just want to start with how you get a degree. And I say this a lot too. This is another thing I'll just reference a lot because there are things to keep in mind. In order to get a degree from Hope College, you need to do these things. You can't do 3 of them. You have to do all 4 of them. You need to complete all the general education courses. I'll kind of reference what we mean by that in a minute. You need to complete all the courses in the major, right? And you need a 2.0 GPA, and you need to complete 126 credits. You need to do all 4 of those things. We'll come back to that in a second. So I want to talk about briefly what Hope means by general education requirements. These are those types of courses that everyone takes regardless of major, right? And I don't want to hear anyone here today over in Martha Miller saying, I want to get my gen eds out of the way. No, these are one of the ways you develop those transferable skills, right, that our alums say are really important, the most important, that professionals, that businesses tell us are really important. So we want you to develop some of those transferable skills. That's one of our purposes of our general education curriculum. Here is what's in there. You actually have a handout in your folders that has more information. It's yellow than what I'm going to put up here. You have the exact number of credits and all of that. You do not need to know all of that stuff today. You don't need to know it all to choose classes. You're going to be sitting with an advisor who can help navigate some of that for you. So don't feel like you have to know what all of that means. I'm going to kind of give you the big view of what those categories are just so you know now. So one of them is first-year seminar. Everybody takes a first-year seminar. It's a 2-credit course on some sort of intellectually interesting topic. We do things like look at primary text and original voices. So you don't use textbooks in first-year seminar. You won't read a textbook, for example. If you have a first-year seminar with a psychology professor, you're not going to have a psych textbook that tells you about, from the perspective of the editor of the textbook, what psychologists said. It won't tell you about what the editor thinks Freud meant or what the editor thinks Erik Erikson meant. You might just go read Freud yourself or go read Erik Erikson yourself. So we go to original voices in first-year seminar. It's a discussion-based class, so you do a lot of discussion kind of like you will in upper-level courses. Another distinction is your professor is your first academic advisor. So that's kind of a special part of our Hope experience in the first semester is this first-year seminar. So you'll be choosing from a bunch of fun and interesting types of topics, some of them that we have this year. Why do I always get my best ideas in the shower? Choices, Harry Potter and the Flying Dutchman, #adulting, from Confucius to Kung Fu. Those are just to name a few of the courses. So everybody takes a first-year seminar. That's kind of a highlight of the first semester. Everyone, I hope, does some science and math. Everyone does some lab science. Everyone does some mathematics. Everyone does some social sciences, things like psychology, sociology, political science, communications, those areas. Everyone does some literature, history, and philosophy, in religion, in arts, in foreign language up through level 2 of proficiency. Everyone does some global learning, some classes that provide global perspectives on a topic. Everyone does health dynamics, which is somewhat like physical education, but also like nutritional information. These courses, and almost all of them have, well, they all do, they all have different choices that you make within them. So there's not like one class for each of these that you do. So there's lots of choices in all these categories. And depending on your choices, you'll end up doing somewhere like 54-ish credits of general education in your time at Hope. So like somewhere in the 50s out of your 126 required credits to graduate will be in general education classes. To give you some context how that compares to like majors, here's just some majors and their credit totals. So history is 36 credits. French is 28 credits. Beyond French 4. Physics is 27 credits in physics, although there are other requirements in areas like mathematics and some other applied sciences. Computer science, 34 credits. Exercise science, 39 credits. Most majors at Hope are in the 30s and 40s for their total number of requirements, although some are, there are a few that are a bit higher, and most of our minors are between 18 and 22 credits. So just to give you a little bit of context. So let's say you were a history major, 36. And let's say you did your gen ed, you completed all your gen ed credits with 54. What's 36 and 54? 90, right? So you could do all your gen eds, you could do your major, and you could be really short of graduating from Hope, right? You need 126, you're only at 90. That is somewhat because we want to build in some time for exploration, for trying one thing and moving into another, so that not every class you take always has to check off a box, meaning it's good for you to try some different disciplines out. There are some exceptions, some really highly structured programs where if you're in there, we kind of at least try to set you on a path to help you explore that before you make moves. These are some of them: special education and music ed, engineering and nursing. There are certain kind of requirements. So those are kind of somewhat more regulated than most of our majors. But in most cases, you have time to check out a variety of classes. So if you haven't seen it yet, most of you probably have. Our first year student registration page looks like this. You've been getting links to it every Tuesday. Who's open to Tuesday tidings this summer? I'm writing those. Open them. It looked like most of you are opening. Now you know, so I'm the man behind the Tuesday tidings. So I send you information each Tuesday, particularly related to this registration type of information. So before I wrap up, I just want to note, so make a couple notes on today's advising process. So we talked a little bit, we set some context. Hopefully you don't feel like you have to have everything figured out before you go to talk to a faculty advisor. And we did some overview of the curriculum. Hopefully that's helpful context for you. What's next is you're going to go and you're going to talk and look through these materials and kind of comb through them with a faculty or staff advisor over in Martha Miller. I'm going to encourage you, as you're thinking, as you're talking, you get a question, you get an idea, you see something you want to do, jot it down. There's also a practice worksheet in your packet that you can write on, but you can also write it on anything. And then we invite you to, but you don't need to. You can submit your registration worksheet, and again, the registration worksheet is the online form where you tell us what courses you think you're interested in. You don't have to know everything perfectly before you submit it. If you're kind of sure, that's a good place to be. You can submit it. You can also go back in later after you submit it and make changes up until June 21. So you can submit that today in our computer lab. There'll be people over in the computer lab to help you, but you do not need to. You can also just wait and do it anytime between today and June 21. But I'd encourage you, if you're kind of getting close, just submit it, get it done. If you want to go back in there later, you can go back in there and make changes. Well, that's all I have for you this morning. I'm going to welcome back up Chris Bowl. He's going to help kind of direct where everybody's going, and I will see you in Martha Miller.